Hello, fellow innovators. This is Patrick Emmons.
And this is Shelley Nelson.
Welcome to the Innovation and the Digital Enterprise podcast, where we interview successful visionaries and leaders, giving you an insight into how they drive and support innovation within their organizations. Today, we're welcoming Tommy Richardson to the show. Tommy is a technology executive focusing on large-scale SaaS and BPO mission-critical systems. His background spans many industries, including marketing, healthcare, HR, education, transportation, and procurement. Currently, he is the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Litmos. Tommy has over 22 years of experience as CTO, General Manager, and COO at a wide variety of companies. Tommy has a passion for building software that simplifies business challenges and delights customers. Welcome to the show, Tommy.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Tommy, if you don't mind, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about your role at Litmos?
Sure. Litmos is a top of the class LMS provider to corporate learners. And so if you work in a corporation today, chances are you might be using our LMS for a lot of the learning that you do. This can be down to basic classes that you may take around compliance training, sexual harassment training, diversity training, but all the way to specialty training. So if you're in healthcare, maybe learning about new procedures in certain specialties. If you work in sales enablement, how do you know your products? How do you learn about how your products compete with other products? So if you're in a competitive situation and you're selling, you kind of hone in your pitches. And so we really do all those sort of things for corporations. And so my part of that is operating all the product area. And product in a LMS software company is some of the traditional things you kind of think about with product, right? So you have technology certainly at play. LMS is an application with a mobile app and a web app that sits on it with a lot of feature functions that have been built. And so, all the engineers and QA people that build that report to me, all the operations and cloud people who, certainly keep production running and secure and available, are part of my team. And then the other part of that is, the product part and deciding like what we're going to go build. Certainly being a product company, we're always looking at like, how do we expand? How do we sell what we have? But how do we build new modules, new features? As Patrick said kind of early on, how do we delight our customers? Maybe even enhance existing features or fix things that aren't delighting our customers. And so that whole product team where we certainly come up with the ideas, capture the ideas, whether they come from sales, marketing, customers, we learn from the marketplace of kind of what they're needing, and all the way to how we kind of go from ideation down to business cases and prioritizations and costing and all that fun stuff as part of product that I do. The other really unique thing in a learning company like ours is we also have content. And so I have the content team, because when you think about it from a customer point of view, they're buying our LMS and also they buy some of our content. The content and the videos and the questions and the exams and stuff that are part of our LMS, like that's part of the product to them. It's what they use and what they touch. And, the processes there are a bit different, so we have production studios, kind of like this podcast, right, where we record videos and, we have actors and all of those things that we employ, which are, to me, very interesting because it's a little bit different than kind of your traditional software company. And so that's the stuff that I do. It's a ton of fun working with the great teams that we have here and working on a world-class LMS product and company that Litmos is.
That's really exciting. And the focus on training and elevating and teaching, I think we all recognize it's going to be a critical element for any organization to succeed. Too often, I think you still hear the old like management philosophies of, you hire somebody who's got experience for the role. But I don't know too many people taking lateral moves at this point, right? So it's almost every situation you have to expect that you're going to be training somebody for the role that they're taking, which I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
No.
But it does provide some very unique challenges.
Oh, yeah. The world's continuing to change. the example I used around sales enablement, even if you're just selling software or you're selling cars, the whole car market has changed a lot lately, with all the electronic cars, and you're trying to teach your salespeople how do you pitch this car versus a Tesla or some other car. Drastic, a lot of changes, I think, in a lot of industries. And like I said, even in software, the same thing. So it's not just even if someone has the skills, the skills that they're going to need next year are probably going to be different than what they have now. And so how do you continue to train them and teach them so that they're prepared to do their jobs? And so if you're trying to sell to that customer, again, whether it's a car or it's a piece of software, you're representing that product really, really well. And that's even true for some age-old things, like sexual harassment. The regulations and things of that continue to change over the years, and keeping that up to date. And so, yeah, it's a lot of fun too. I think it's definitely a worthy cause when you think about it. Like we're helping people learn, we're helping people improve their lives because they're learning new skills, which should help them do better in their jobs and better in their professions, which helps their families and their livelihood. And so I think you got a little bit of that, tucked in, which is also pretty cool.
What is I'm curious, what is Litmos's differentiators? What is the secret sauce that differentiates Litmos from other LMSs?
Feature-richness. And so Litmos has been around for a while. And when you sort of compare the feature functions that it has in it, it's one of the most feature-rich ones out there. And so like if you go look at any of the analyst reports, you'll see Litmos in the upper right-hand corner of the LMSs that are there. They've also focused on corporate learning. So there's all kinds of different learning spaces. You have classrooms, you have K through 12, you have municipals, training firefighters and stuff like that. Like I think they've been very focused on corporate learning, which I think has really helped them excel. And that's a big market. Most of the organizations out there are corporate in form. And so that's that. And I think the other thing that's in play, like they're just not software. And so they have content. And so a lot of the common content, as I was sort of saying before, around diversity training and sexual harassment training, like when you buy Litmos's LMS, you get it included. A lot of cases, the HR department or the compliance department or whoever's buying that training, they're going out there hunting. They're on Googling, trying to find it. They're asking their peers in the industry, like, hey, who do you use for that? For us, being a reputable company that folks with name brand recognition, we kind of come with the credentials and the recognition right away, where if you're using our content, it's going to be high quality, it's going to be up to date. And so I think you put that together, and that's one of the key reasons why Litmos is perceived very well out there in the industry.
That's awesome.
Tommy, it sounds like you've got a library list of content that your clients have access to, but then you can also create individualized content. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too. So on our platform, and this gets into kind of the feature richness of it, you can go in and create your own content. And so we have tools to help them do that. Now, it's not going to be as fancy as the content that we create because it's done in a production studio. But if there's some unique content that a customer has just for them, we have the tools where they can go create that. We also have the capability to help them do that too. And, some companies I've worked with before, most companies struggle with this because unfortunately, learning in a lot of companies isn't a forefront issue. It comes last. And like you look at it and it's like a lot of companies I've worked at, everyone wanted to do it. But the big problem was, well, how do we go build all this content? If you just go back to sales enablement, like everybody wants that. Everybody wants their salespeople to be armed with how to sell their products, to how to have a competitive discussion. Why should you buy ours versus theirs? Like these are common sales motions. And in most cases, like that stuff is word of mouth, it's tribal knowledge. It might be on a PowerPoint somewhere, but you don't have a system like video and some Q&A questions, to sort of test for knowledge are much better ways to learn than doing a PowerPoint. And then you can track compliance to it, like who all took it, who didn't take it. And so I think our ability to have the tools to help them do that very easily or either help them build that content is definitely a distinct advantage for us as a company.
Nice.
So I'm curious, looking into an interesting new year, right, as we're kicking off 2023, what is going to be your number one focus involving new products, new features? You sit in a very unique position as the chief product and technical officer. It's a lot of influence over direction. What are you looking at from an innovation standpoint?
Oh man, I mean it's not any one thing. I would kind of wrap it up into, well, there's going to be some technology innovation. How can we leverage certain tools out there in the cloud to help us run faster, to maybe provide some functions that we don't have, recommendations. A lot of these clouds, AWS and Azure, have gotten a lot smarter on tools around machine learning and AI, where you don't need 10 PhDs from MIT to nothing against MIT, those are super smart people, but
or
hard
PhDs.
to find, our PhDs, yeah, hard to find, but the cloud guys have made that a lot easier now to adopt some of those technologies. And so I think, certainly some innovation of leveraging some of those new sort of cloud technologies that the cloud providers are giving us will be something that we'll do. The other is just natural LMS feature functions that will add to the product that our customers have been asking for, that our sales team has been looking for. And then the other is, potentially getting into extending ourselves a bit into to natural next step things for an LMS to kind of get into new modules, and that kind of gets into, those two things I just kind of mentioned. Those are innovation, but probably a little bit less risky innovation. When you think about kind of adding a new product or a new module, those are a bit riskier, but those also are, that's how you grow a bit faster too, right? You come up with an idea of how you make learning easier in a corporation, and you go build that. And it's probably an idea that a competitor doesn't have, may even be an idea that customers don't even know they want. But I expect us to this year kind of spend some time on a couple of those and see, and I think the trick with doing innovations like that is, and I think it's true for any of those ideas I just said, like you need to have firm business cases really defined. And obviously, if you're going to enhance your existing product or build some new features on existing product, like those business cases will probably be a bit tighter. So when you say, hey, this is what we're going to do, either here's the price increase we can get out of it, or the additional users or clients we can sell it to. Still a lot of unknowns even there, but like you're probably going to be a little bit tighter versus if you go, hey, I'm going to go build this, I don't want to give away any of our innovations to any competitors that might be listening to this, but certainly different than going and building some new module that's not out there that no one else is doing. And so I think you still need a business case on it, but it's probably going to be a little bit looser, and you're just going to have to measure it as you go and continue to kind of see, like, are you meeting your assumptions, and maybe manage it a little bit tighter so it doesn't turn into one of those getaway trains where, hey, we're going to go spend, $1 million for a year, and before you know it, it's 3 years and you spent 10, which typically doesn't happen with feature function additions, but building new products and modules, that's always a risk.
Yeah.
So I expect us to kind of do all three of those, which I think kind of makes sense. You can't ignore any of that. I think like you got to do the technology evolution because you don't want to fall behind as the technology is easier to use. We're in competitive situations, and if we're not going to do it, our competitors will. We have to listen to our clients, and when they, there's key feature functions that they build, like we have to do that. Like we can't go disappear for a year and not do any of their requests. And then we have to innovate. We have to kind of figure out, hey, we're great today and we're in the upper right-hand quadrant. But if we don't continue to innovate and figure out what's that next great thing, then, in 2-3 years, we may not be in that right-hand quadrant. And so to me, you kind of got to do all three of those. You can't really put all your chips on just one of those segments, or you might eventually that'll probably catch up to you.
It sounds like you have a bit of a portfolio management approach to where you're investing, depending upon where the business is at, right? You've got some of the longer term investments with completely new products, some nearer, closer term with the modules, and then just even refinement and improvement. When you're going through something like that, how do you prioritize? What is some of the thoughts that you have?
I mean, I think it depends on where you are and sort of your maturity. And I think this is true whether you're starting from scratch. You've been sort of prioritizing by committee, and it's, loudest voice wins, and you're kind of moving to something more sophisticated, or you're already running something sophisticated. Typically, to me, you sort of come up with a category of work. And if you're doing it the first time, you can look at some benchmarks. I kind of talked about like 3 categories of work there, but like how much you're going to spend on security, how much you're going to spend on tech debt, how much you're going to spend on enhancements, how much you're going to spend on support and defects, how much you're going to spend on new features, and how much you're going to spend on innovation. And when you've been doing it for a while and you've kind of got your mix right, you typically kind of have some percentages that sort of act as, I wouldn't call them barriers, but I would almost call them like guardrails, because it's like, well, we normally spend 20% on technical debt, and we normally spend 30% on new features. And so that allows you, as you're kind of making decisions, not that you can't spend more or less in those areas, but they kind of get you to think about it. Because I would say generally, I think what you have to do, it's kind of a multi-dimensional problem. Everything that you're doing, any type of money I think that you're doing or spending, whether it's tech debt money or defect money or innovation money, there needs to be a business case on it. Like, why are we doing it? And the business case needs to have some monetary reason to it. Now, it could be a positive one. We're going to go build this, and it's a new thing we're going to sell, and we're going to make money. It could be a negative one, which if we don't do defects, our churn is going to increase. But either way, you break it into dollars and cents where you understand that, the impact to the company. And in theory, you should be working on the ones that are going to provide the highest value to the company. But again, I think you got to be careful where you can't ignore your category of work. And so I think that's where that second layer kind of comes in. With once you kind of have your priorities and you can sort of see in monetary terms, what the priorities are, then you can go lay your category of work on it. Because like you may all your priorities may say you should do all this innovation work, and like don't do anything else. And I would say, well, that's probably not right. You got to get your category of work, your mix work. And so to me, I think that's a big thing. And I think whether you're starting out doing that from scratch, like if you're doing it from scratch, you some benchmarks out there that you can go look at. You can talk to other people in your line of work. And how much do you spend on tech debt? Oh, we spend 20%. How much you spend on defects? For 15%. And kind of start to build some guardrails that help you kind of figure out where you're going to spend. And then if you have the right systems in place, you can track that over a time period and go, well, how did that work out? We got a lot of customer complaints and we had some churn because we didn't fix the defects fast enough. Okay, well, we need to fix our allocation. And then, well, what are we going to cut? And so I've always kind of seen that process work really, really well. Again, whether you're going from not doing that and you're just starting to very mature companies. And there's some great frameworks out there. Like I'm a big fan of Pragmatic, which is a great product process, which does a lot of those things that I talked about. And they have some great templates. Speaking of training, they have some really good training programs too to sort of teach people how to do it. I do not work for Pragmatic, but I would, if you're thinking about doing something like that, I would definitely look them up. They've got some good stuff.
So, Tommy, you've had a really interesting career so far and just a lot of different paths. I think our listeners will be interested to hear how you got here. And did you expect that this was going to be your path?
That is very funny. No, I did not. I don't know if this is most people's journeys, but to me, there's always 2 or 3 events in your life that sort of take you someplace. And in the moment, you don't know. But when you look back on it, you're like, wow, those decisions really changed the journey of my life. And so, no, I did not know. I got into technology at a very early age, 18 years old, by joining the Army. And I joined the Army to, get some money to help pay for school. And long story short, I kind of narrowed it down to being a tanker or going into what they called back then computer operations and programming. and I almost did the tanker. And I do wonder where in my life would I be today. But luckily, I picked the computer operations and programming world and went in and did that and really found, what I would say would be sort of my calling. It's something I loved. I was really good at it. The Army had a computer school that had people, graduates of college. Here I was, this young kid that was 18 years old, and I didn't really grow up with computers either, so it was all new to me, but man, it was like natural. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And, went back to school, took all the computer programming classes, graduated, and then went to work. Back then they called us programmers. Now they like to be called software engineers. But, very, very quickly, again, because I loved what I was doing, I think I did pretty well. And because of that, and also, I was sort of a unique programmer. I didn't mind talking and presenting and, stuff like that. And so I moved up pretty rapidly through the management ranks, in my career. And like I was the CTO in my, I think 29 years old or something.
Wow.
It was my first CTO job. And so since then, yeah, I've been doing tech work. I've done, kind of like you guys said at the startup, I've done all kinds of things. I did startups, a couple of startups, which were a ton of fun. And I would say about the startups, I learned a lot because, in a startup, you're doing a little bit of everything. But one of the things I learned in the startup, which is kind of another inflection point for me in my career, is just like how much you get done with so few people. And why is it big companies get less done with so few people? You even look at Twitter now, right? It's kind of like, man, they've got more innovation. We could debate whether people like the innovation or not, but like, man, they're producing more innovation than they have in the past 3 months. Then like Twitter, I don't think changed much, in 3 years with all those engineers. And so to me, something that kind of stuck with me around startups is just like, well, how do you do that? And so when I kind of decided to kind of get out of doing startups and go do big co, because I went to ADP and Siemens and then Teradata, so some big public companies there. It was all about, well, how do we have a lot more engineers now. We have hundreds of them working on stuff like how do we organize ourselves? How do we think? How do we empower our teams to think and work like they were in a startup? And so that's been something that I spend a lot of time on. I actually had a meeting, with the team with Litmos today, talking a little bit about that. So how do you kind of cut the red tape, do that? And I think, that's really helped me personally and the companies I've been involved in, because we've been able to have some real high performing teams that have built some really great product. Cause you hire smart people, you don't want to micromanage them. You don't want to trap them under a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. Like you kind of want to let them go. Now it needs to be controlled because you don't want to have 70 teams going in 70 different directions. So there's a little bit of governance, you could say, that you have to layer on top. But I would say that's something else, to me that I've kind of spent a lot of my time on. And, as companies grow and scale, because that's the point, right? You get in a company, you want to grow it. And corporate America, like, how do you not slow down? How do you not start getting too bureaucracy, kind of driven? And how do you continue to innovate? Is definitely something that stuck with me. And now in the private equity world that I've been doing the past few companies, I really love it because I think the private equity world is a good mix of risk and reward between startups and public companies, right? Because unlike a startup, typically most startups, like they're proving their business model, like there's a lot of risk. The private equity firms are mature companies. They're a proven model. It's just like, well, how do you scale it? And certainly there's some big private equity owned firms, but I think if you get in kind of the mid-market, you can still make quick decisions. You can still innovate. It kind of feels startup-ish as far as getting the work done. But then you have the advantages of a bigger company. It's a proven business model. Like you're not sitting here going, oh my God, like, are we going to sell this thing? Are we going to, what are our sales numbers going to be next month? They're pretty predictable. You're not worried about how to make payroll. You're not worried about, oh God, we got to go raise another round of funding and interest rates are going up. Like, what's that going to look like? And so I really enjoyed kind of transitioning into the private equity world because of those, so the advantages I think it has the advantages of, kind of the big public companies, and the speed of the startups.
Yeah, that's great. And who were some influencers along the way?
Oh, lots of people. I've learned a ton from a bunch of people. I go back to one of the first CTOs who really helped me at Ceridian. His name was Dipankar Mandel. I still remember that name 25 years from now. Learned a ton from that guy on how to build tech. And, this was back in the 90s when the web was still in its infancy. And like we were talking about layers and we didn't call them microservices, but just the ideas about how do you scale apps and break down apps, and the languages and stuff that we used back then were different. But the fundamental architectural design is what you see today in a lot of the apps. And so learned a lot from that gentleman. Also learned a lot from our corporate CTO at ADP. Darko was his name. He doesn't look like a Darko, but certainly a very helpful person, about kind of, in a big company, like how do you manage, sort of process and architecture and designing things the right way and getting them done. Certainly learned a lot from that gentleman along the way. The guy I'm working for now, Mike Scarborough, this is the second time I've worked for him. And his name is the professor because he's full of knowledge and loves to teach and share everything he's learned over the years. And so certainly I've learned a lot from that man. And, without any of those guys, there's other people too, along the way, people that work for me, I've learned a lot from as well. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to work on a team with people that I've worked with before. And so other folks like that, I've learned a lot from, and we've been able to help each other over the years.
That's great.
Well, Tommy, it's been great having you on. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience and your wisdom. It really can't say thank you enough. So we wish you good luck in the new year, and hopefully we can maybe have you back on the podcast maybe later this year as well.
Yeah, we can talk about that innovation I was talking about. Maybe I could talk about actually what we launched.
Tell us what you did, how you dominated.
Yep, what worked well, maybe what we learned.
Right. Here's what made the competitors cry. Right.
Yep. That's the plan.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. We also wanted to thank our listeners. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us.
And if you'd like to receive new episodes as they're published, you can subscribe by visiting our website at dragonspears.com/podcast, or find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode was sponsored by Dragon Spears and produced by Dante32.